So we've talked rather extensively on this show about the supposed eviction crisis that we've been promised for some time. And it's because of this supposed crisis that Democrats, of course, according to Democrats anyway, the CDC must be allowed to continue forbidding landlords from evicting tenants who don't pay their rent. Never mind that the CDC doesn't have that authority. Never mind that the policy deeply infringes on the basic human rights of property owners. We must, they say, allow these people to remain in homes and apartments they aren't paying for. And we must allow this indefinitely, no matter what. Now, I confess that I haven't been persuaded by these arguments up until now, because all of that changed with a report just published in The Hill, which I read yesterday. Here's the headline. Nearly half of LGBT renters behind on rent fear eviction in next 2 months. And this is credited to research, by the way. It says nearly half of LGBT renters behind on rent fear eviction in next 2 months, research. Well, who could dispute that if research has declared it? The research has spoken. But in any case, I, for one, will completely abandon my views on this issue now that I know that some gay people are impacted. I had no idea. Here I was opposing a destructive and insane and oppressive government policy, and then The Hill comes in and says, well, yeah, but the policy will help some gay people. Well, okay then, never mind. I stand corrected. If gay people will be helped, please take all of my private property rights. Take away the gun rights too, and free speech. Take away my very life if it will help, if that will be beneficial to some gay people. I submit to the desires of our LGBT masters. Do what you will, my lords. I'm sorry for having defied you. This, anyway, is the reaction that we're expected to have, I guess. Here's the article. It says about half of LGBT U.S. renters who are behind on their payments fear eviction in the next 2 months, according to research released by the University of California, Los Angeles' Williams Institute. The Williams Institute compiled a brief examining housing stability during the coronavirus pandemic using data from the U.S. Census Bureau's Pulse survey. The research found that 19% of LGBT respondents said that they are behind on rent. Of those, 47% said that they fear eviction in the next 2 months. The findings from the survey come after the Supreme Court last week blocked an eviction freeze put in place by the Biden administration to shield financially vulnerable Americans during the pandemic. Well, did anybody explain this to the Supreme Court? Did anyone present this powerful legal argument that the eviction freeze is good because some gay people might be evicted without it? Was this legal case laid out to the justices? It should be if it hasn't been. Some more from the article says Williams Institute researchers also found that 41% of LGBT respondents rent their homes compared to 25% of their straight cisgender counterparts. About 39% of LGBT people owned a house with a mortgage or a loan compared to almost 48% of non-LGBT people. In addition, more LGBT people of color, 47%, rent their homes compared to 37% of white LGBT respondents. 51% of LGBT people of color said that they feared eviction in the next 2 months, compared to 38% of white LGBT people, 47% of non-LGBT people of color, and 46% of white non-LGBT people. The Williams Institute's brief concluded that a key component of a person's housing stability is whether they own or rent. LGBT people, and specifically those of color, are more likely to be impacted by the COVID-19 pandemic. A study released by the Williams Institute in February found that LGBT people of color were 2 times more likely to contract COVID-19 compared to their straight white counterparts. Well, geez. Now I'm against COVID too, on second thought. I mean, now that you've told me that, I'm opposed to COVID. I had no idea that my race and sexual orientation afforded me immunity from the virus. And now, frankly, I feel the ethical responsibility to go out and get infected on purpose and to infect many other straight white people as well, just to kind of even out the score a little bit, since we're keeping score, apparently. Now, if it seems like I'm just heaping sarcastic scorn here and offering nothing else, you're exactly right. Because this kind of intersectional madness, that's what it deserves. Just our scorn and ridicule and sarcasm. There is no way to engage with it honestly or coherently anyway, because it's not put forward honestly or coherently. Just starting with the first sentence, it says, about half of LGBT people behind on their rent fear eviction. Well, yeah, and? That's not the same thing as saying that half of LGBT people, period, fear eviction. It's to say that half of the people who are behind on their rent fear it. But shouldn't everyone who hasn't paid their rent fear eviction? I mean, shouldn't the number be like 100%? This is like saying that half of LGBT people who are currently speeding down the road without a seatbelt fear a fatal car accident. Well, yeah, but that's good. It's not good that they're speeding down the road, recklessly, but it's at least good that they're aware of the consequences and they're mildly concerned about it. So I have more questions about the other half, really. Also, you could easily flip this around and you could phrase it the other way. And you could say nearly 100% of LGBT people who pay their rent do not fear eviction. So that's awesome. Looks like everything is fine after all. But here I am doing exactly what I said I wouldn't do and we shouldn't do, engaging with the argument. Because there's nothing really to engage with here. The sexual orientation of people who haven't paid their rent is of absolutely no consequence or relevance at all. There's no reason to even talk about it. The wrongness or rightness of the eviction moratorium would not change one iota if 100% of all LGBT people would be evicted without it. Why should it? I mean, do the moral or legal facts change depending on what identity group the affected people belong to? Well, yes, that's exactly what the people who do this kind of research and blast it out in their headlines want us to think. The point for them is really twofold. One, we're supposed to abandon our position at the behest of a protected class of people. You know, they say, "Oh, you want to get rid of the eviction moratorium." Well, did you know that if we do that, there might be some LGBT people who are evicted? And we're supposed to say, "Well, never mind." And two, the main thing here is that this now enables the eviction moratorium advocates to claim that abolishing the eviction moratorium is homophobic and an anti-gay conspiracy. That's the setup. That's actually what they're doing here. So look for that talking point to be rolled out shortly if it hasn't been already. Like clockwork, entirely predictable, but no less insidious, not to mention ridiculous and annoying and insane. And for that reason, the Hill today is, of course, canceled. Listen, hit that subscribe button right now. Do it right now. I thank you for your compliance. It is somewhat appreciated.